The rich got even richer at safety for the Seattle Seahawks with Nick Emmanwori coming to town in the second round. But how are the Seahawks going to take advantage of this wealth of riches in their secondary? We're going to be taking a deep dive on our next training camp preview on our Blue Friday edition of Locked On Seahawks.
You are Locked On Seahawks, your daily Seattle Seahawks podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Greetings, 12. This is Corbin Smith, host of the Locked On Seahawks podcast, your daily Seahawks podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Glad to be joined, as always, on Blue Friday by my co-host, Nick Lee. And a special thanks to all the 12s out there for making Locked On Seahawks your first listen 5 days a week. Whether you're tuning in from Sumner, Washington, or over in Fort Wayne, Indiana, we appreciate each and every one of you. And we are closing in on 20,000 subscribers on YouTube. That is a testament to the incredible support of you, our valued listeners. Help us get past the finish line before training camp. We got some awesome guests coming up next week, including Seattle sports host Stacey Ross. She will be joining us on Monday to talk about John Schneider's off-season gambles. It is going to be a really fun episode. Make sure you tune into that one. That's going to be 4 p.m. Pacific time live here on Locked On Seahawks. Anyway, Nick, let's get into the festivities for today's show. And we've been talking all sorts of positions to this point for training camp previews. We've had quarterbacks, running backs, cornerbacks. Now we're going to go to a position that I think, if everything comes together, might be the deepest position on this entire roster, the safety group, which you already had two really good starters in Julian Love and Coby Bryant. What a revelation Bryant was at safety last year, coming into the second half for an injured Rayshon Jenkins. And then in the second round, you get an absolute specimen in Nick Emmanwori, 6'3", 220 pounds, 4'3", 240, basically jumped out of Lucas Oil Stadium. The guy is just a phenomenal athlete. Oh, by the way, he was a unanimous All-American, so he can play pretty good on the football field as well. But now you have to figure out how to get the most out of this group. It really is a good problem to have if you're Mike Macdonald, Adam Durde, and the rest of this coaching staff.
Absolutely. It is definitely one of those good problems to have. Too many good safeties. What do we do? Julian Love, of course, is the alpha in the room for now, with the versatility, the high football IQ, strength and coverage, the leadership now, and that role he can play in the center field. And then, of course, Coby Bryant, like you said, revelation gets thrown around a little bit too much these days, but that's truly what happened with Coby Bryant, because we were having these conversations last year, 12 months ago, ahead of the 2024 season. Like, what do we do with Coby Bryant? where is he fit in all this? Cornerback, what's going on? As he moved to safety, does that help him out? And boy, did it ever. I mean, he can slide all over the place, slot versatility, the nickel hybrid safety kind of look. And then, I mentioned, I think it was a week or two ago, Nick Emmanwori, the Batmobile. He's just everything under the hood, everything you could want, just like comic book level kind of stuff. And just the physicality. Obviously, he's not going to be playing the same role as a guy like Julian Love. And then you can't forget about guys like, Jarek Reed, D'Anthony Bell. Those guys are going to be playing some roles, assuming one or both are on the roster, with special teams, speed, some tackling. But just specifically focusing on those three. Mike Macdonald has shown he's not afraid. In fact, maybe he prefers to use kind of a big nickel 3 safety kind of look. And so you pretty much have, I would say, the ideal setup for 3 safeties, with 3 safeties there that have different skill sets that you could bring to the table. Of course, like I mentioned, Julian Love, the center fielder, that you can disguise coverage with him, and he can play that, the true last line of defense. Coby Bryant can play a nickel, can drop down, he can cover, he'd be kind of a hybrid mix of the two. And then you got Nick Emmanwori just bringing the boom over the middle, tight end matchups, perhaps box safety kind of look. So if you draw up a 3 safety look on defense, it's hard to get better than the 3 safeties you have in Seattle, just from how different they are. I think is the strength, honestly, how each safety kind of complements each other, with roles that you need in sort of a quote unquote big nickel package with three. Love, Bryant, and Emmanwori bring so many different things to the table that really the sky's the limit for what Macdonald can do with these three. And it's got to be like Christmas morning, trying to, waking up, figuring out what he can do with that kind of skill set at his disposal.
I wish we had video footage of the draft room, the couple minutes leading up to that trade up, because it was Christmas in April for Mike Macdonald. There is no way that he was not slamming his fist on the table like, we've got to go get this guy. And he was probably doing it the night before. John Schneider even made it clear, well, we thought about trading up back into the first round. And that was the guy they wanted, was Nick Emmanwori. And sometimes when you get in these kind of situations where you have three safeties and traditionally there's two in the field, sometimes it feels like you have to put a square peg into a round hole to try to make it work. But as you mentioned, that doesn't feel like the case to me. Now, maybe when we get out in the field for training camp in a couple weeks and we're out there for a few weeks, maybe it does look more like that than we anticipate. But I'm expecting it to be the opposite. I'm expecting there's to be some fluidity to this, because Mike Macdonald's got, not only does he have three players that all have different skill sets that complement each other, but all three of these guys have positional flexibility. This is not a case where, well, Emmanwori is a 220-pound safety that we strictly got to play him like a linebacker. And that, gives you less flexibility. You don't have that problem with Nick Emmanwori. In fact, when I watch his tape, maybe one of the most impressive things that he does, Nick, is his ability to play that big nickel role in the slot, because he has the speed and the quickness to play against fast, speedy receivers. How many 6'3", 220-pound guys can do that? So you aren't put in a spot where, as Mike Macdonald or Adam Durde, you're not put into a spot where you're thinking, well, if I get this guy in the field, like I've got limited things I can do with him. You don't have that issue with Emmanwori. And Coby Bryant's played outside corner before. He has played nickel. He can play in the box. I mean, he can truly play all over the field. They've even blitzed him off the edge before. I don't think you're going to see him do that a lot, but Coby Bryant's one of those guys. He's just a football player. You can put him wherever you want. And I think Julian Love is molded much the same way. I mean, he was an outside corner at Notre Dame, and he has evolved into a top 10 safety. ESPN, even their evaluations pieces that they do every year with scouts and stuff, he got a top 10 ranking in that this year. And it's deserving because of his instincts, the way he plays the game. You can move him all over the place. He could play outside again in a pinch if you needed him to. So they have all these different things they can do. To me, the good problem is just trying to figure out, can we whittle this down a little bit? Because I think Mike Macdonald, the mad scientist that he is, the last couple of weeks where they've had time off here, that he has been in the laboratory. He has the film out, and he's trying to concoct the best ways that he can utilize these three guys, because Baltimore ran a ton of three safety looks. Even the Seahawks did late last year. Rayshon Jenkins played a lot of snaps as that third safety. And look, no offense to Rayshon Jenkins, but Emmanwori is a much more athletic, much higher upside player that can fill that role and do some things that Rayshon Jenkins wasn't going to give you. He wasn't going to be playing speedy, shifty receivers out of the slot. Emmanwori can do that. And so there's going to be some growing pains trying to figure out how to best utilize these guys. But I think what is going to help Macdonald and Adam Durde is that you're not confined to just a handful of options. If anything, you've got too many things you could do in this group, and you got to figure out what is the best way to maximize them. Again, it's a good problem to have. That's why this group, you plug DeAnthony Bell in for a few snaps. I mean, they've got a lot of fun pieces in that group. You could have dime sets with four safeties and be incredibly effective with Emmanwori and Bell being hard hitters in the box. I am fired up to see what Mike Macdonald does with this group.
Yeah, I picture like that scene in the accountant with Ben Affleck. He's like drawing on the windows, drawing on the table, just running all the numbers. That is Mike Macdonald with some of these safety packages, just seeing all the numbers and seeing all the analysis in front of him just kind of flow through. And it can be, yeah, like you said, this is not pigeonholing anybody. It can be a little positionless in a good way, where all three of these guys can play multiple spots. It is not just Nick Emmanwori is a box safety, Julian Love is the free safety. And that, like you said, it's not that. Now, there could be places that could be kind of where the optimal situation is for those three, but that doesn't necessarily mean that they can't be flexible. Yeah, an injury, God forbid, or just a special facing a special matchup on the other side where maybe you got to mix and match with some bigger receivers, some more athletic tight ends, or more 4 or 5 wide receiver sets, that kind of thing. So there's the flexibility, like you said, can be overwhelming. But this is why, Corbin, the Seahawks felt the need to bring in Mike Macdonald, prioritized bringing in Mike Macdonald as the head coach for situations like this, where they have a bevy of talent at a defensive position, and he will find a way to maximize it.
And this is a quarterback's worst nightmare, when you have 3 safeties that have different skill set, but you can move them all over the place because you don't know, well, is he the free safety in this play, or is he a money linebacker? You can do inverted coverages. I mean, the X's and O's in me, I'm just fired up right now. I'm going to be diving more into that in a later episode, but I cannot wait to see what they do with this group. And it does create havoc for offensive coordinators and for quarterbacks trying to figure out who's what and where. It is going to be a lot of fun. And I know Mike Macdonald is looking forward to getting that mad scientist hat and glasses on and trying to figure this out. When we come back, we're going to dive into our dark horses. Our dark horses. Maybe that's another episode. We can have our dork horses too. Our dark horses for the Seahawks this upcoming season going into training camp. Who could steal a starting job? Who could steal a roster spot out of nowhere? We're going to talk about some guys that could absolutely emerge from nothing and become something here in training camp. That'll be coming up next year on our Blue Friday edition of Locked On Seahawks. Summer sports are in full swing, and whether you're all about baseball under the lights like Nick is, golf on the green, or high-stakes soccer action, FanDuel is the best way to make every game even more exciting. You're already following the action. Why not make it a little more thrilling? With FanDuel, you can get in the game while your friends are getting sunburned at the beach. I've been using FanDuel to track my favorite matchups, and the app keeps it fresh with new daily promotions and fun ways to bet, especially during the dog days of baseball season as teams vie for playoff positioning. It's easy to use, fast to pay out, and makes even regular season games feel like must-watch events. If I think Fernando Tatis Jr. is going to hit a home run and isn't going to get robbed this time, I can bet on it without a hitch. Whether I'm placing a same-game parlay or watching a bet right into the 9th inning, FanDuel makes it feel like I'm part of the action. New to FanDuel, new customers can bet just $5 and get $150 in bonus bets if your first bet wins. Open the FanDuel app today or visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to get started. Welcome back to the Blue Friday edition of Locked On Seahawks. I'm your host, Corbin Smith. He's Nick Lee. A special thanks to all the 12s who are tuning in, and thank you as always for making Locked On Seahawks your first listen 5 days a week. We greatly appreciate it. Let's talk dark horses here, Nick. And this is a term that I feel like there's a little bit of ambiguity to it. It depends on certain people's viewpoints, because sometimes when I mention dark horse, somebody's like, oh, are we talking about a guy that is bottom of the roster that maybe has a chance to make the team? Or are we talking about a player who probably is on the roster but has a chance to emerge and take a starting spot when he isn't expected to do so? Or maybe it's a player that looks like he's a fringe player that comes out of nowhere to not only become a starter, but become a major impact player. There's some ambiguity to it, and I think that makes it an exciting thing to talk about. But for me personally, I look at it kind of twofold. When I think of dark horses, I'm thinking of people that aren't getting attention, players that are really hovering under the radar, whether it is going for a spot in the 53 or being on the roster, getting a starting job and not being talked about in that capacity. To me, those are dark horses. And I'm really interested to see who you've got on this list, because I think we're going to have some different viewpoints on how we gauge a dark horse. And I think that makes it a fun conversation.
Yeah, my first one really kind of goes into both categories, where he could not even make the roster, but also when he makes the roster, if and when he makes the roster, could become a impact player. And that's receiver Cody White. And last year he had 2 catches for 44 yards in that overtime loss to the Rams, and then kind of just dipped for several reasons. It's not just, it's the reasons outside of his control. There's some coaching decisions, but Cody White, especially with the influx and just the turnover and the receiver room has a chance to has a runway, at least in the preseason, to really make a statement here. First of all, he's got NFL experience. He's not just coming in here with a blank Pro Football Reference page. He's got some some catches and yards in the NFL that is more than a few guys in this room can say at this point. He's known for his route running. He can make some contested catches. He's versatile. He can bounce in and out with the slot outside. He can play multiple receiver spots in this Kubiak offense, which I think is going to be prioritized. This offense doesn't strike me as one that can really afford to have a kind of a one-trick pony receiver. And I don't consider Cody White to be one-trick pony. So he's a guy that I want to watch, certainly in the preseason, because he's going to get a nice runway to get some targets, some screen time there at the receiver spot. I'm not saying he's going to usurp Cooper Kupp or anything like that, but he definitely has a shot to not only make the roster, but get a handful of targets and be a part of this team and run some routes and just log snaps. And whether that doesn't necessarily mean he's going to get 40, 50 targets, but still be a contributor on this team and versatile. And guys, especially I think this coaching staff with Kubiak will value the fact that he could bounce around in spots. And even if Kubiak strikes me as a guy who would maybe take a receiver who isn't obviously the most physically dominant athlete, but he knows all the spots, versus a guy who is a somewhat physically dominant athlete who's just a one-trick pony. So Cody White has that in his favor. And the other offensive guy I'm going to go with is Federico Moranis.
Now that is a dark horse.
That is a very dark horse. I'm not saying he's going to start or anything, but he's a guy that as far as dark horse, a guy that I'm excited to watch because he's got experience at center and right guard. Newsflash, two positions that have been much maligned the last several years at FAU. And I will say I kind of dove way deep into his college ranks at FAU, and he did really well against Clemson. When they played Clemson, he allowed 1 pressure, 0 sacks, 0 hits, and 52 pass blocking snaps against one of the better defensive lines in the entire sport of college football, and he did it at FAU. So there's something to be said about that. So he's got the versatility of all the interior positions. And so I'm not saying I'm not going to sit here and call that he's going to make the roster, but he's a guy with, again, versatility and the experience he has at several spots, and he rose to the occasion at FAU and playing some stiff competition. Wouldn't shock me if into the couple weeks in August into preseason, like, okay, let's see what this Moranis kid has got. Oop, and my lights just went out. I have to move.
Yeah, you're in a motion lit room there, Nick. We'll let you be dark for a few minutes here. For me, you can see all 5 of my dark horse candidates on my article on Emerald City Spectrum. I'm not going to get to dive in every single one of those players, but like you, Nick, I got a couple guys on offense that jumped out to me. And at the receiver position, I've got to go with Steven Sims Jr. And what intrigues me about Steven Sims Jr., not just the fact that he has been a really good kick and punt returner in regular season games, but he also has done it in playoff games. He returned a punt for a touchdown in the divisional round for the Houston Texans a couple years ago against the Baltimore Ravens, who was on the sidelines and got to watch that? Mike Macdonald. So this, and Jay Harbaugh, I believe, actually, he might not have been with the Ravens. He was actually with Michigan at that point. But this is a guy who Mike Macdonald has seen do things in the playoffs in kick and punt returns that the Seahawks did not have anything like that last year consistently there. And the other thing is he's got 2 years with 20-plus catches earlier in his career at Washington. So he has been a viable receiver in the NFL. And oh, by the way, Clint Kubiak coached him when he was a freshman at Kansas. So the connection there is deep. Those guys have known each other for a long time. Steven Sims, the last minicamp practice, it felt like 70% of the throws were heading in his direction. Like the guy was just gobbling up catches. He's a tiny receiver, not the fastest guy, but he's sneaky shifty. He's got soft hands, and he's just a really good kick and punt returner. So to me, that's a guy that people aren't talking about that I could see absolutely making the roster, not just because his kick and punt return talent, but I could see Clint Kubiak with that long relationship he's had with him being like, hey, he can play slot, he can play boundary, I can hand the ball off to him occasionally. this guy fits what I'm looking for on offense, and him being that 5th or 6th receiver for the Seahawks. And in the offensive line, I mentioned, for me, dark horses don't just have to be guys who are fringe players or bottom of the roster making a team. It could be a guy that's going to be on the team, but wins a starting job. And it's crazy that a guy that started the last 6 games for the Seahawks last year would qualify as this, but Versatility didn't get any snaps at right guard the entire time for open OTAs and minicamp. It was Christian Haynes and it was Anthony Bradford. He was the backup behind Gray Zabel at left guard. That's all he did in those practices that were open to us. But Seattle's run game got sparked when he and a healthy Abe Lucas were in the lineup together those last 6 games last year. And he has the athletic traits. He has the physicality to handle this zone blocking scheme of Clint Kubiak's. If Christian Haynes or Anthony Bradford cannot grab the bull by the horns early in training camp, I absolutely, not only am I expecting, I am guaranteeing that Seattle Seahawks is going to get an opportunity again to throw his helmet in the ring there at right guard. And I would not be shocked if he starts week 1 for the Seahawks at that position, because I know, talking to people in the organization, they like him a lot. That's why I was really surprised but look, they didn't have a backup over there on the left side, but move Christian Haynes or Bradford over there some if you need to. See if this guy can win that job. You want to have the best 5. Seattle Seahawks is a guy that to me could be a dark horse from a starting lineup perspective.
Definitely. And I got 2 guys here on defense as well. Jeremy Sheriff was basically the first team all preseason last year, certainly among Seahawks fans. And he made some exciting plays getting after the passer. And I see him this year. I got to sneak a BYU reference in here. I see him as like a Kyle Van Noy type, which, there's some Kyle Van Noy, Mike Macdonald ties, and, a linebacker who other coaches didn't quite know what to do with. Is he a pass rusher? Is he an off-ball linebacker? And then he thrived with Baltimore. And Jeremy Sheriff, well, he doesn't have that same draft pedigree, and that's he's not at this as the same physically, but the position change clearly is something that Mike Macdonald sees something in Sheriff that says that they can fill some valuable roles. Maybe as a Sam linebacker setting the edge, picking his spots, rushing the passer, and also in run defense. Because we all know Mike Macdonald loves multiplicity, he loves variety, and he loves versatility. And if Jeremy Sheriff can show that with moving positions and also maybe filling in the role he was before as more of a pass rushing edge type, if injuries or underperformance happen elsewhere, perhaps he can sneak in there as well. So Jamie Sheriff, obviously a guy to look at, again, second preseason there. Josh Ross is a guy that I think really will thrive with familiarity. Kind of just broke down in an article I just wrote, just basically his ties with Mike Macdonald and Jay Harbaugh before the Seattle Seahawks, and reasoning why he kind of landed in Seattle in the first place middle of last year was the familiarity at Michigan with both Macdonald and Jay Harbaugh, and then in Baltimore with Macdonald again. So bevy of NFL experience in the special teams. And honestly, there's a pretty good sized gap in the depth chart between Ernest Jones, Tyrice Knight, and the rest of the linebackers. And if Josh Ross wants to have a really strong August in preseason and an off-ball linebacker and really make a statement, he could make a spot. He could make a case for that, third linebacker, or that at least that first backup spot to the off-ball linebacker spot. He's familiar with Mike Macdonald's scheme. He's been in this program for a little bit now, and he's probably, I think he has the inner track to make the roster, at least on special teams. So my dark horse for him is really watch out for him maybe as a role player and backup linebacker. And if he could be pressed into duty, God forbid there's an injury ahead of him. But I think he has the skills and the background to at least hold the fort down.
I'm staying to the same position, but a different player. And I'm going with an undrafted rookie, a guy that wasn't even on Seattle's roster going into rookie minicamp, Derek Jackson. When I turned on Kentucky film, watching a couple other players that I was looking at, I kept having my eyes hover to Derek Jackson. And the guy is 237 pounds. He ran a 4.51 40 at his pro day. Like, he's got legitimate low 4.5 speed, and you can see it with his coverage skills. He was one of the highest rated coverage linebackers by Pro Football Focus, and the film backed it up. Like, he is so fluid moving into his coverage zones. He can play man coverage pretty well for an off-ball linebacker, and he flies sideline to sideline and downhill. He can take on blocks. I mean, he's almost 240 pounds. So in today's NFL, that's still a decent-sized linebacker. He's just had some injury issues. But Derrick Jackson's a guy, if he can rediscover what you saw 2 years ago at Kentucky defending the run and his coverage stuff from last year, if he can put that stuff together, Seattle clearly liked what they saw. They cut Jackson Woodard, a player I really liked. Coming out of UNLV, they cut him and said, well, we're going to keep Jackson instead. He does a lot of things Mike Macdonald gets fired up about. He's also been a pretty good blitzer when Kentucky's used him in that capacity. That is a guy that I think has a way higher ceiling than Josh Ross as a defensive player. And that could be a dark sleeper to be your number 3 linebacker waiting in the wings there. I mean, if I'm Patrick O'Connell and Drake Thomas, the objects could be closer than they appear in the mirror when it comes to Derrick Jackson. And off the edge, real quick, Tyrice Knight, the fact that Mike Macdonald, the second coach here, I mean, Pete Carroll was gone. Mike Macdonald had no allegiance to Tyrice Knight, who was drafted when Pete Carroll was there. And yet, not only did they bring him back after Arizona cut him, they brought him back as a future reserve deal in January. So clearly, Mike Macdonald and his staff, they see something in Tyrice Knight that they're at least intrigued by enough. Hey, I'd like to see a little bit more from you. And that is another position. After the top 4, there is a Mount Everest-sized crevasse going down to number 5 in the edge group. Maybe it ends up being Jamie Sheriff. Maybe it ends up being Tyrice Knight. Maybe the third time is a charm. If he can stay healthy, he's had some injuries. If he can stay healthy, he had the most run stops 2 years ago in the preseason of any defensive end outside linebacker in the NFL. This is a guy that if he can just put a little more on tape rushing the passer, he has the size to play in this scheme. He can play with his hand in the dirt with a 2-point stance. I think Tyrice Knight, this might be his last chance, but it might be his best chance that he's had. So I'm keeping an eye on him as a dark horse to make this roster as well. When we come back, we're going to continue our 90-man countdown. We've got numbers 30 through 26, some really fun names we're going to be diving into. That's coming up next here on our Blue Friday edition of Locked On Seahawks. Welcome back to the Locked On Seahawks podcast, Blue Friday edition. I'm your host, Corbin Smith. Glad to be joined by my co-host, Nick Lee. And a special thanks to all the 12s who are tuning in. Thank you, as always, for making Locked On Seahawks your first listen 5 days a week. We greatly appreciate it. For your second listen, don't forget to check out Locked On NFL Scouting. The NFL Draft is way in the rearview mirror, but roster moves and news, they never stop. Host Kyle Krabs and Joe Marino will make you the most informed NFL fan this offseason. Find Locked On NFL Scouting on YouTube or wherever you listen to your podcast. All right, Nick, we are closing in on the top 25 Seahawks in our 90-man countdown, and it might seem, wow, we got to that quick, but we're 12 days away from the first practice for training camp. It is going to be here before you know it. You and I are scrambling, trying to get our 90s wrote up for Emerald City Spectrum. We are way behind schedule. Everything got pushed up a little bit, which honestly, it's not a bad thing. Football returns a little bit quicker. I like that. Let's get to numbers 30 through 26, and we're going to start off with Seattle's other second-round pick. We talked Nick Emmanwori a little bit earlier. Elijah Arroyo selected at pick number 50, and that caught some people off guard. Even in the draft room, the media room, there were some people like, whoa, they drafted a tight end at 50. But when you watch the tape and you just see the natural athleticism and pass catching ability, one drop his entire college career. I know there's been some injuries. That's the biggest reason. John Schneider said that's the biggest reason we could get him at 50 was his viewpoint. Like he would have been picked earlier if he had been healthy all those seasons. But you got to see a lot of what he was capable to do in Miami last year. And I felt like they did a lot of dumping the ball off to him on quick passes. And I think he can do a lot more as a seam stretcher. They've talked about using him as a big X receiver as well. That's the kind of athlete this guy is at 250 plus pounds. I don't think he's much of a blocker. I think you can use him as an H-back in that capacity. Not going to be an inline guy, really. That's not his game. But this is what Noah Fant was supposed to be, and maybe he still ends up being in this system, but that's what they're hoping from Elijah Arroyo, that he can be that true field-stretching tight end that creates major matchup problems for opposing defenses.
Yeah, I've decided to call Elijah Arroyo the human Instagram filter for tight ends. He just looks – that first clip of him at OTA is like, that's Elijah Arroyo? Dang, like That's not your grandpa's tight end there. And
don't swipe right too many times.
No, yeah, exactly. 590 yards and 7 touchdowns at Miami last year, and underutilized and maybe misutilized, like you mentioned, with his skill sets. And an exciting addition to this offense. I think that he can be really just like the Joker, the defensive Joker version of a pass catcher. Like he can be out wide, he can be the slot. Yeah, maybe chip a guy and head out. Maybe he's not going to be that nose to the grindstone kind of blocker, but you can do a lot of fun things with Elijah Royal.
Coming in at number 29, it might be crazy that we're having, look, we had our third string quarterback in the mid-30s because Jalen Milroe is extremely exciting and he could get some gadget plays. But we're going to talk Drew Lock here at number 29. And some of our listeners might be like, why is he this high on the list? Because, look, backup quarterbacks are incredibly valuable. If Sam Darnold gets banged up, if Jalen Milroe plays really well in the preseason, maybe Milroe ends up being number 2. But I would think Drew Lock, with what he did a couple years ago, winning against the Eagles on Monday Night Football, a game-winning touchdown, 70+% completion rate, he is incredibly revered in that locker room. That is the veteran presence he's got a little bit of moxie to him. That's the kind of guy that's going to say, you know what? Yeah, I haven't had many game reps, but I'm going to go out and I'm going to fire this pigskin all over the place. And I think he's done a better job the last couple of years of not making terrible decisions like he did early in his career. He'll still occasionally uncork one. That's kind of his mindset. He's an aggressive thrower, but I do think we're seeing major improvements, and a lot of it came in Seattle as the backup to Geno Smith. I think that this is a guy that deserves at least some talk here, because if you have to play him for a few games, you can win football games with Drew Lock, and I think that is incredibly valuable for an NFL team.
It's funny, with the mystique surrounding, who is Sam Darnold this year versus last year, and the excitement of the upside of a Jalen Milroe. Drew Lock feels like the Ant-Man in the Avengers group photo, where he's not the most exciting or money making part of it, but he's first team all vibes. He's there. Guys clearly like him, and I'm not sure. I think if he's starting more than a couple games here or there, I think that's not a great proposition, especially with what the Seahawks have going for him. But and he's clearly shown what he has over Jalen Milroe. Obviously, is the NFL pelts on the wall, proverbially. And that I was at that Monday night game against the Eagles. That was just like what is happening right now? Like the Eagles have all their horses, and they were trying to stop a losing streak and trying to eventually win the Super Bowl, which they did the year after. But and then all of a sudden, here comes Drew Lock. That last drive, just whatever. Just kind of, he's the definition of the.
That's the perfect word for Drew Lock. It is whatever. Like that's kind of the way that he plays, and you know what? It worked that night.
It did, yeah. So if Darnold goes down, it's going to be the Drew Lock show. It's not going to be Jalen Milroe immediately, but he has a higher floor at this point. Definitely a higher ceiling than Milroe, but first team all vibes, and he can win you a couple games, and he's just fun to have around. So there's room in the NFL for guys like Drew Lock.
The next couple guys that we have here on our list, it's a really interesting case study with both these guys, because it shows the importance of putting a player in the right scheme to maximize what they do well. Marquez Valdes-Scantling has bounced around the league. He's spent time in Green Bay, Kansas City, Buffalo, New Orleans the end of last year. I don't know that he's had a more productive stretch than he did the 9 games in New Orleans, particularly the first 4 or 5 games when he had a healthy Derek Carr throwing to him. He was averaging over 22 yards per reception, and he had 4 touchdown catches. Clearly, Clint Kubiak knew how to get him the football and maximize his traits as kind of that feast or famine downfield guy, but he also created after the catch better than we've ever seen in his career. And so Clint Kubiak says, oh, DK's gone. Let's go get Marquez Valdes-Scantling, because I already know I can do well with this guy. I did it last year in New Orleans. I think I can mesh him with his offense. He can play inside and out. I can run the ball with him occasionally. Again, he's got some of that flex to him where you can move him around. And so Seattle bringing him back, and I was impressed with the way he carries himself at the practices this spring. Like that is a big thing for me, especially with veterans. You can tell he's all business, coming and getting the job done. I'm intrigued to see what he can do with a full season in Clint Kubiak's offense. And then on defense, Josh Jobe. I mean, the guy gets cut by the Eagles the end of training camp. He's on Seattle's practice squad. And this is a guy who wasn't drafted out of Alabama. He didn't play especially well when he had chances in Philadelphia. He got burned quite a bit. Seattle rolls the dice with him in Atlanta. He has an outstanding game against the Falcons. And then Mike Macdonald just decides, you know what? I know Trey Brown's going to be back in a few weeks, but I don't care. You're my starter. And he rolls with him the rest of the season. And all Jobe did was have a pick and 6 pass breakups. He was consistent against the run. I thought his play leveled out a little bit late in the season, but he still played really well. And they bring him back on an affordable 1-year contract. He's going to have to fend off Shaquille Griffin for that third cornerback spot. But Josh Jobe's got all the reason in the world. Like, he's going to be a free agent after this year. Go out and show that last year wasn't a fluke. He is one of the most compelling players to watch for that reason, because it can be tough to do that. But I think both these guys, Josh Jobe found a scheme that really fits for him on defense. That gives him a chance to repeat that success in 2025.
Yeah, it's like the scheme fits, like you mentioned. And Marcus Valdes-Scantling also, minimum 200 career catches, is the active current leader with 17.4 yards per reception. So that is the
he's a big play guy.
Big play guy, and he fits the scheme. Really excited to see what he can do there. And then Josh Jobe, like you mentioned, he's physical. He's got some ball skills, versatility there. Clearly better as a boundary corner, I think. Where he struggles at a little bit, consistency and penalties. I think he had 5 penalties last year, and not a full seasons of work. So that is a little concerning. But if he can hold that in, man, he's going to be a fine. The Seahawks could do a lot worse right now at boundary corner than Josh Jobe.
And capping off this cluster of players just outside the top 25, I am so bullish on the upside of Tyrice Knight. And we talked about this some last year. Man, I thought he was going to need some time to be ready to play. And then they had some injuries early, and Mike Macdonald's like, look, you ain't a rookie anymore, kid. Get in there. And he made some mistakes, but I thought Tyrice Knight played as well as any rookie linebacker in the NFL last year, especially the last 9 games. And you could see some of the fluidity and coverage. He's got some work to do in that regard coming from UTEP, but he's had this offseason to attack those things. You see him get downhill. He knows how to attack the run. And he was a really effective blitzer, which Mike Macdonald loved to send his inside linebackers. He did both the Jones and Knight. He had 1.5 sacks last year, a couple other quarterback hits. He's got some swag to his game, even though he's really a quiet dude. Like, he doesn't have much to say. He kind of talks with his actions, but yet his play has some swagger to it. And I cannot wait to see a full season with him and Ernest Jones together, because I just think those two feed off each other. Jones loves playing with him, and I just think Knight is a guy that's got a really high ceiling, because even though he played a lot at UTEP, there was still a lot he needed to learn to be an NFL linebacker, and the jump he made even last year, I think he has a chance to be a really fun player this year in that Seahawks defense.
Well, it says a lot that Mike Macdonald jettisoned Terrell Dodson and Jerome Baker and said, all right, Rook, go get him. And he stepped up to the plate and made it happen, and had 88 tackles, stepped in there. And I think he can only get better with just getting his sea legs, getting more experience. Like you mentioned, his blitzing proficiency. The Jones-Knight duo will be fun to watch this year.
As always, you can follow me on X and Blue Sky at Corbin Smith NFL. You can follow Nick in the dark at Nick Lee 51. Make sure to subscribe to Locked On Seahawks on YouTube or wherever you get your podcast to make sure you don't miss a single episode. It's going to be a rare one. We've got a doubleheader today. I'm going to have a second show coming your way tonight, and it is going to be a full-fledged Friday mailbag, because you guys have tons of questions going into training camp. I'm going to be dedicating the entire show to tackling those questions, so make sure to submit those questions on social media or on our post on YouTube for subscribers so that we get as many questions as possible. Going to be a fun show tonight at 8 p.m. Pacific time. Make sure you're listening in and enjoy the rest of your Friday afternoon. Go Hawks.